Talking about brushes. Photoshop, everything that makes a mark, anything you can draw with, is called a brush. Okay? You find your brush selection tool up here. There are actually two. There's one here in the corner, and then there's one next to it. Okay? I want you to only use this button, the one that has the number that shows. Okay? That number is the size of the current brush, which in this case is at 117. That dimension is in pixels, by the way. It's 117 pixels. Just fun math, since this is a 300 pixels per inch canvas. Remember, we made this 6 by 6 by 300. This is a little less than half of an inch in diameter, this brush. It's also, by the way, while I'm on that topic, you should be able to find your image size here. 6 by 6 by 300. Okay? As you can see, when I pop this list down, there is quite a selection of brushes. Okay? And they're all going to have their own qualities. And those qualities will vary by how hard you press, because you're all using a pressure-sensitive tablet like you're supposed to. Okay? This brush is actually not a brush we'll be using, but it does bring up an interesting point. When Photoshop is making a line, it has to calculate all of this, how it interacts, how it bleeds in and out, this is like a watercolor brush. To do that requires a lot of processing power, which means if I go quickly, you will notice that the brush diagram, the little brush head that you see here, gets way ahead of the line. Okay? That's called lag. Lag is not something you want, because if you're trying to draw naturally and your line isn't keeping up with you, it can be frustrating. But for our purposes, we want simple brushes, and that is why we are going to limit ourselves to the very basic standard Photoshop brushes to begin with. We'll be using soft round and hard round to start, and a couple of variations on those. Hard round is the simplest of simple Photoshop brushes. It's like a pen. You will notice it has crisp, hard edges. You'll also notice it does not lag at all. Soft round, see how that looks fuzzier? It's because it's pixelated. Also simple, and it's more like a pencil. Also no lag. You'll also notice that it doesn't quite fill up that circle. It's hard to see at this scale, but if I make the brush bigger, you'll see that it's actually smaller than the brush. There's a reason for that. It has dynamics that the hard round doesn't, if you use those dynamics. But in the basic version, hard round, soft round, it doesn't use those expression methods. So for the same size brush, soft round will be smaller and a little bit lighter. We will be using soft round for 90% of our work. Soft round is your friend. It also depends on how powerful your computer is. The reason I'm also doing this is these brushes are very easy for the program to compute. If you have a weaker system, they will run well. Some of the fancier brushes won't. Okay, going to go with some of the other brushes that we can choose from. Only be two. There's an option for pressure, opacity, and flow. Opacity and flow expressed via pressure. We have that for the hard round. Okay, so if I go softer with my pressure, harder with my pressure, softer with my pressure, it's a more expressive drawing tool. Okay, this can be very nice for painting. It is the fanciest hard brush we will use. So you have hard round basic and hard round pressure equals opacity and flow. Opacity is just what it sounds like. It's how opaque the brush is. Flow is how much paint is on the brush. Basically, the brush runs out of paint over time. And we will use the soft round version of the same. And that allows your brush, your pencil strokes to build. It's natural feeling. If your computer can, use this brush for 90% of the work. This is the brush that I will use during tutorials. It's the brush I'll be using during class. So you have 4 brushes. Notice how I'm using the layers, folks. I am turning on the layer I want to mark on and work on, and turning off the one I don't want to look at. That's what layers are for. They're that infinite sketch pad that gives you a chance to organize your work. So we have brush number 1, brush number 2. By the way, that warning is because the layer I'm drawing on is turned off. Brush number 3, brush number 4. That's the basic 4 brushes we'll be using. All right, so more about brushes. Those are our 2. Now we're going to talk about options that we have here. We have size and hardness and a whole bunch of different kinds of pen tips. Don't mess with the hardness, don't mess with the pen tips. Only thing I want you to adjust is size. And size you can adjust for depending on, what you're working on. For jewelry, you will usually be working between 4 and 7 pixels. Because we work small. By the way, you can push the slider, or you can just highlight the window and type in what you want it to be. This is pretty much the smallest you'll use, 4. Don't go below 2. And I'll show you why. It starts to break apart. You can see the pixels clearly. Okay? Now that's fine. You have to understand that when you print this out, a 2-pixel brush, it's a little thicker than a hair. It's going to print out just fine. For painting, I'll normally use like a 14-ish. Like I said, drawing 2 to 7-ish. So that's the size. Now, you can, if you want to, erase by simply changing the color over here. Background color, bringing it to the front, either by clicking here or by using Shift plus X to switch colors. And I can erase a little bit that way, or I can erase a lot. But let me show you what has happened. I'm going to do a quick color fill here. So I just filled a layer with color. Turn this layer on top and see what happens. Everything is transparent the way it's supposed to be, except for where I drew in white. In Photoshop, white is a color. If you draw in white, you have created something opaque. It's going to cover up what's below. What if we don't want to do that? If we don't want to do that, instead of using brush with white paint, I highly recommend, in fact, I pretty much insist, that you use the eraser. Eraser tool has the same effect, except for it's not opaque. It removes what you've drawn without creating an opaque white color. So for most of what you're going to want to do, the eraser is going to be superior. Your eraser can also be set to any kind of brush and size you want. Right now it's set to the same as this, soft round pressure and flow. That's nice. And I can make it as big as I want. The harder I push, the more opaque it'll get. Or I can change that if I want to. I can make it hard round, for example. And then it doesn't matter how hard I push, it's going to just erase very hard and crisp. You can see where there might be times you would want to use either one of those. So just keep that in mind, that you can set the brush type that the eraser is using at your discretion. I like to have it set to the same brush that I'm working with most of the time. So that's a pencil, that's an eraser. That's how they work, that's what they can do. Oh, by the way, under both, let's talk about what's going on up here. Shows your size, shows that it's as working as a brush. Opacity is at 100%. Sometimes you want to play with this, sometimes you want it less. So use a moderately sized brush. By the way, if you're ever trying to draw and nothing happens, it's because you've probably got the eraser tool selected. But I can limit that, take it down to 47%, and then it's going to be much harder to make this dark. If I push down all the way, I can get it there, but compared to what it is at 100%, no. Okay? Flow, I don't recommend you play with. Leave flow alone. Smoothing. If I have to do a long, curvy, careful line, let's say I want to make a pretty question mark. Smoothing will allow this computer to get involved and help keep that line smoother. Now you'll see a leash. You see it there, the pink? there's going to be a little bit of lag. If you want to just do a dot, it's hard. You have to wait for a second because it's trying to smooth things out. But if you're trying to draw something and you don't have a really steady wrist and you want it to look nice, add a little smoothing. Add 25%. It makes a difference. If you really want it controlled, go up to 75. You won't be able to make any speed. But Photoshop will become increasingly involved in how smooth that becomes. Okay? If you're having a hard time drawing, you're going, or writing, I'm going to write my name. I'm going, I can't write my name. Check your smoothing. If smoothing is up, it of course is going to slow down and inhibit what you can do with the brush. That covers drawing with a brush and an eraser. The next video portion we're going to talk about is going to be what else is over here on the toolbar and how to navigate in Photoshop.